Recording in progress.
All right. Can you all hear me? Okay. So this is the notice of preparation scoping meeting for the Canopy project located at 1009, 1011 Gravenstein Highway North. My name is John Jay. I'm the associate planner with the city of Sebastopol, and I am joined by Katie Green, who is with Rincon Consultants, and they are the consulting planner on the project. So I'm going to go through the slideshow. I have some slides that I will present, and then I will toss it over to Katie to do some of the more technical background information. So the agenda for today's meeting has an introduction of the project description, an introduction to CEQA, what is scoping, how to submit comments, and then any questions or comments that anybody from the public may have. As far as city staff goes, as I mentioned, my name is John Jay. I'm the associate planner. With us today also is Carrie Svanstrom, the planning director, and with Rincon Consultants, Katie Green. For the project location, the site is located at 1009, 1011 Gravenstein Highway North. It encompasses a 6.1 acre lot in the northwest area of Sebastopol. Its current land use designation is low density residential. Its zoning is office light industrial, which allows 12.1 to 25 units per acre. And the surrounding land uses are the O'Reilly Media Center to the west, Gravenstein Highway to the north, and primarily residential uses to the east and south. As the project description is laid out, the project proposes 80 solar, all-electric, 3-story townhome condominiums with a potential for 16 ADA accessible dwelling units, or ADUs. Okay, the project applicant proposes to use a state density bonus to allow for a waiver to increase the building height to 3 stories, which is 6 feet above the 30-foot max height limit for that zone. The project also requires a conditional use permit for residential only within an office light industrial zone, site development review, and a vesting tentative track map. A new 6-inch or 6-foot wide pedestrian pathway is proposed to connect the West County Trail out to Gravenstein Highway on the southern border of the site. There are 21 required trees for removal, while the site is proposing to preserve 111 of those trees along the perimeter of the site, so to the east and north. Proposed landscaping would include new plantings throughout the open spaces, along drive aisles, roadways, and streets, and surrounding of the proposed buildings. The project includes a total of 160 parking spaces in garages and 58 surface spaces across the site. Other amenities of the project include gardens, active and passive seating areas, a children's play area, and a meditation hammock garden are also proposed. So here I will toss it over to Katie to go through the introduction of what CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act, is, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, John. I'm going to go over some background about the environmental review process, explain the purpose behind this particular meeting, and briefly outline the anticipated scope of the document that we'll be preparing. The reason we're doing this analysis is because of the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, passed in 1970. It is at its core all about public disclosure and input. It requires that we analyze the environmental impacts of a project and take those into consideration before a lead agency makes a decision on a project. To do that, we prepare environmental review documents, including environmental impact reports, or EIRs, which is what we're looking at this project. In addition to simply disclosing the anticipated impacts on the environment, CEQA also requires we work to minimize, reduce, or avoid those environmental impacts through what are called mitigation measures. We also prepare and adopt a mitigation monitoring and reporting program, which typically takes the form of a detailed table of requirements detailing who is responsible for seeing the mitigation measures implemented. Next slide, please. This slide provides an overview of the CEQA review process for an environmental impact report. The first step is circulation of a notice of preparation, during which time the lead agency, which in this case is the city, solicits input on the content of the draft EIR. The notice of preparation for this project was published on July 6th. We're currently in this initial step, and the purpose of this meeting is to collect comments on the EIR content. After that, a draft EIR will be prepared and then published for review. And during the 45-day draft EIR comment period, comments on the adequacy of the draft EIR are solicited from the public and agencies. Following completion of that draft EIR circulation period, a final EIR is prepared, which includes responses to comments on the draft EIR, errata noting any changes that were made to the draft EIR, and that mitigation monitoring program. The final EIR is then published, at which time responsible agencies consider the final EIR, and then finally, the lead agency makes a decision on the project. Next slide, please. So we're here today to receive scoping comments. Scoping invites public input on the environmental analysis that will be conducted for the project. Scoping comments can suggest topic areas to address, identify issues of concern, suggest potential alternatives to the project, and or propose mitigation measures. We will not be recording scoping comments verbatim today. Instead, the comments will be summarized. If you would like to provide detailed comments, we encourage you to do so in writing. Next slide, please. CEQA requires an analysis of 20 separate issue areas, which are listed here on this slide. And the EIR will address all of these resources shown on the slide. Next slide. Once the draft EIR is available, it will follow the structure shown on this slide. There will be an introduction and an executive summary, which is a great place to look to get a snapshot of the issue areas, impacts, and any mitigation measures required. The EIR will include a detailed description of the project, and then the meat of the EIR will be the environmental impact analysis. For each of the issue areas on the previous slide, we'll have a chapter which includes a setting section laying out the existing physical environment and regulations relevant to that issue, an analysis of the project's impacts, and identification of mitigation measures where required. This section will include details not found in the executive summary. Another key section of the EIR is the alternatives chapter, which includes a required no project alternative and other build alternatives intended to reduce or eliminate significant environmental effects of the project while still achieving most of the basic project objectives. Other CEQA required sections, such as significant irreversible effects and growth inducement, will also be covered in the EIR. With that, I will turn it over to John to discuss how to submit scoping comments.
As detailed on the slide here, the deadline on submitting comments is August 7th of 2023. If you would like to submit a physical comment, you can mail that to the City of Sebastopol Planning Division, attention John J, Associate Planner, at 7120 Bodega Avenue, or you can email your comment to me at jay@cityofsebastopol.org, and please include in the subject line the Canopy Project NOP. Yeah, we'll make these slides available online after this meeting. And that is it for the presentation. If you do have a comment that you would like to make at the meeting here today, would you please, if you're in person, line up at the podium and make sure that the microphone is turned on. And if you're in Zoom, please raise your hand and we will call on you. The format on how we take public comment for these hybrid meetings is we will go to the room first, and then we will go to Zoom, and then back to the room, and then back to Zoom.
Bit of time walking down the Rodata Trail, and I'm curious as to whether or not the trees that are identified to be removed, do we know what those, does the city know which trees those are?
Yes, on the project application that's on the website, they do have a list of trees that are projected for removal, and then the trees that are going to be remaining. So that's something that is already a part of the project details, and it is on our website.
Oh, okay. And I'm just curious, since I haven't yet read those details, I just wanted to ask if any of those trees include eucalyptus.
No, the majority of the trees that are staying are a good portion of the redwoods and oaks that are kind of the property line trees.
Mhm.
And then I believe some of the internal trees are Gravensteins, and then some.
The fruit trees.
Yeah, the majority of the fruit trees on the interior part of the lot.
Thank you.
I have a question. I'm not sure it's the right time, but I live off of Hurlbut. What's the impact on Hurlbut going to be in terms of, is it going to be a thoroughfare for this complex, or is it going to be isolated?
And John, maybe you want to show the slide, the site plan?
Should I sit down?
If that's your only question, I think we'll be able to answer that. You can go ahead and sit down.
So on the screen here is the site plan for the project. The 2 points of access are off of Mill Station Road, and also through the current O'Reilly driveway that's there. And then they're also including an additional one on the south. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So along the Hurlbut side, there's no connection. No. It would be towards where the P is. Correct. Yeah, that's Hurlbut. Terms of the entire, entire property is very narrow. That's, and there's no, it doesn't look like access is, how tall are those buildings? Really necessary.
So you're correct. So just to one thing at a time. So there is no access 4 vehicles on Hurlbut. This is actually a deed restriction that O'Reilly put on the property before they sold it. And the applicant is not proposing it. They're well aware of that. We have talked to them about potentially doing a pedestrian bicycle access so that people who live in the back part of it can access the trail and walk around. We're all aware that Hurlbut is a very narrow street and then doesn't have sidewalks or anything like that, but right. Correct. We did close that to secure the site. We asked them to close that. But correct. And that is actually something that as staff, we've proposed that they have a pedestrian access into the site, and they are amenable to that. They just wanted to make sure they respected the Hurlbut neighborhood. And so I realize this is a CEQA scoping meeting, but it's helpful to get a little bit of impact on input that in and see the nods of the heads here. And we are going to ask you to come up to the microphone because we're recording this so that people who want to view this, who aren't able to attend the meeting, can hear the questions as well as the answers.
So one of the things that I'm concerned about is light pollution. It's a very obviously quiet and dark place right now. And my property is literally on the fence line. And I would like to make sure that lighting, landscape lighting and everything is all low and facing down, both for my personal and other neighbors, quality of life, but also just for the general, issue of light pollution on our planet right now.
Thank you.
How tall are the overall buildings going to be at the rooftop?
So the overall buildings will be roughly 36 feet tall, so they're 3 stories. They are proposing to sign a density bonus for the additional 6 feet height. Normally, we would only allow 30 feet as a building height in that district, but the state density bonus allows them to ask for additional concessions, and that is one of the things that they're adding.
And John, do you want to point out which ones are 36 versus the shorter ones? Because they are not proposing all of them at 36 feet. So I believe, and I do know that the applicant is here, so I may ask her to text us, but they're asking for additional height for the buildings that are close to the Riley building. As you know, the Riley building is pretty tall in itself. The buildings adjacent to the residential areas, however, are not that tall. And maybe we can look up and see what the height is of those buildings. They are all, actually, sorry, I'm getting a response that they are all 3 stories. Correct, yeah. They're all 3 stories, yeah, but they have the buffer of the trees between them.
I have a question only because of my ignorance. Is there a state or federal mandate that we have in a given city a certain amount of projects like this?
So the state does require us to have a certain amount of housing units developed in a year. That's the regional housing. I can't remember the full acronym for it.
Needs allocation.
Needs allocation, where the state, based off of census data, provides a number for each city to produce on a yearly basis. This project would greatly help that number of units that we would need to create. But yes, there is a allocated amount on a yearly basis that the state requires each city to produce, and if not, then there are certain additional requirements that you would have to
So
go
the,
through.
so the project on Bodega Avenue does not fulfill that.
John, do you want
That
me to field that
84.
one? So, so the regional housing needs allocation, the includes a certain number of units at various income categories. They range from above moderate, which is basically market rate, moderate, which is 100% to 120% of median income, low income, and very low income. The Woodmark apartments are the very low and low income, and so they will help with those categories. The number of total number of units for the next 8 years, which started in January for the city of Sebastopol, is 213 units, and that's divided amongst the various categories, and that's over 8 years. So that is within our growth management ordinance, which is still in effect, which the city adopted in 96 and renewed, I think, in 2016, 2017. So it is consistent with that. This particular project is proposed as a market rate project with inclusionary housing. And so of the 80 units, I believe 12 would be moderate income, and the 68, is that correct? 68 would be market rate. So for those categories, these units would sort of count towards those.
And as far as security or police would be, Sebastopol Police Department would be the jurisdiction? Okay.
Correct.
By the way, my name is Kathleen DeVideo, and I live at 850 Martin Lane in Sebastopol, or just outside of the town limits. What is the total number in the Woodmark
So
project?
the Woodmark apartments, which is
Yes.
a rental apartment development on the west side of Bodega Avenue at Robinson and Bodega, will be a total of 84 units. They're doing it in 2 phases. Phase 1 has started construction. As you know, if you've been by the site, they're doing the
Yes.
grading. Always the messiest part of construction right now. They're doing 48 units right now for that.
Thank you.
Yep.
So at this point, then we're looking at 80 there, 80 here, and we're 160 into a total of 213.
213. Yeah.
So with 213 units approximately, right? That's at the very least 213 new vehicles on the road. Is there anything going to be done about the traffic? I know that we did get rid of the lanes and we put bike lanes, which made it a little worse. But is anything else going to change? Because the traffic is pretty crazy, especially right there during school. There's going to be a lot more kids in the schools, so it's going to be more than 213 cars. At the very least 213 cars, because everyone's going to have a car. Is there anything being discussed about the traffic? Or the
Sure. So, and this is part of the purpose of this meeting is to look at potential environmental impacts. Traffic is one of the impacts that we look at. So I know I see Katie over there taking notes on that as a concern. We are looking at that. We have a traffic consultant who is doing existing traffic counts. They look at the number of units, the type of units, number of bedrooms, those types of things, the amount of traffic likely to be generated by that, and analyze that. We do have in our general plan, which is our long-range 20-year document for the city, outlined potential traffic improvements to accommodate additional growth. And so one of the things we'll be looking at with this, and we do look at the kind of the cumulative, not just this project or just that project, but we do look at cumulative projects that we're anticipating or that we know about, like the Woodmark and some of the other projects. We have 4 townhomes in downtown from that Habitat for Humanity is going to be building across from Safeway, that kind of thing, to see if that triggers any of those improvements. Some of the improvements outlined in the general plan on the north side of town is a potential either roundabout or signal at Covert Lane and 116, and also at Healdsburg and Murphy. Healdsburg and Murphy, where the new, obviously that doesn't have enough space, at least in my assessment, for a roundabout, but it does for a signal potentially coming into downtown. We also know that there's obviously sidewalk gaps at, directly across from Covert Lane along 116, where you're coming up the hill, that embankment there. And so looking at, all forms of potential transportation impacts, not just to vehicles, but also to pedestrians and bicycles.
And at this stage right now, what comes first is a building, and then secondary, the traffic issues, or are you guys going to do them both at the same time?
Well, what we're doing right now is we're looking at, and so basically our traffic engineer estimates, what we're doing right now is we're studying the potential impacts. That's what the environmental impact report does.
Okay.
It analyzes the potential impacts and then also looks at potential, what we call mitigations, which are, well, what can we do to accommodate this or to lessen the impact of this? Just like when the charter school went in, one of the impacts they had and the mitigations they needed to do was to do that signal and also to do a crosswalk at Danmar across 116. And so those were the responsibility of the charter school because of the traffic they were generating and the potential need for crosswalks there. We're doing the same thing for this project before anything happens to look at what the potential impacts are and what we need to do to respond to that. And then all of that kind of gets put together when we do the project review at the Planning Commission and City Council level.
Okay. And then is the height of the building, is that set in stone, or are you guys still possibly going to make them only 2 stories? Or is it set in stone that it's going to be 3 stories?
So the 3 stories is what they're proposing.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I only learned about this today, so haven't caught up to the rest of you. And this might be a foolish question, but is all of this just considered low-cost housing? I mean, my concern is senior housing. Is any of that involved in this kind of housing?
So this project doesn't have senior or low income. It just has the above market rate, and then there's the 12 inclusionary units which are at the 100 to 120% of median income.
John, do you want to talk about the accessibility of the units there?
Yes, and then there's also the applicant has proposed for the ground floor units to be ADA accessible, and also conversions to accessory dwelling units, so that some of the ground floor units, if there was somebody who needed that ADA accessibility, could be converted. They would basically be constructed in a way that somebody could come in and convert it to include ADA accommodations.
We live on Hurlbut directly looking out where the fence is for the O'Reilly property. Is there going to be any kind of entrance or exit there?
So there will be no vehicle access on that side of the project. The only vehicle access will be off of 116 and Mill Station Road.
Thank you.
Yep.
And just for the individual who noted that she just heard about the meeting today, I do want to assure you, as was in the slideshow, that this isn't the only time to comment. Yeah, okay. Maybe John, you can pull up the comment period. Okay, but we had someone else who joined later or just heard about it today. But just so you know, the comments for there's 2 different components to it. This is CEQA. This is the environmental impact review. There will also be a planning commission hearing regarding the use permit, and they'll be reviewing the CEQA at that time later on. For the CEQA, if you have concerns about potential environmental impacts, and it's on the screen there, you have until August 7th to submit those to the city. We do know of a number of potential issues that we're already working on in terms of Rincon, and Katie, I don't know if you want to sort of just talk about those in general.
We actually have that slide, if you could go back a couple, of the 20 environmental impacts covered. But those include everything from A to W, from aesthetics to wildfire, alphabetically. So we cover biological resources, cultural resources, noise, air quality, greenhouse gas emissions, yeah, so we'll be covering all of those issues. And if you have specific concerns or issues that you want us to look into, we're happy to hear about this today or before the end of the comment period. Here we go.
And I will make these slides available on the city's website as well, so that if
Do you want me to talk about this for the, okay. So before COVID, the city actually heard about the project at this time. City Ventures had option to purchase the parcel from O'Reilly at that time. And they submitted and did a preliminary review with the city, both with our design review board / tree board and with our planning commission. Because the tree removals and the design, as well as it does require a use permit because the site is zoned light industrial / office. So if for any of you who have been around for a really long time, longer than me, because I only know from the documents, in 1990, when the O'Reilly was developed, they actually had planned to do three additional structures on those vacant parcels, a parking structure and 2 additional office buildings. They never constructed those, but it went through environmental review at that time. So we have that document that we know of some issues that we need to be careful about, that we're working on for this project as well. But when City Ventures, so they didn't build the office, and it sat vacant or just kind of in its natural state, other than the Ceres Garden, which is now relocated to the charter school. When City Ventures introduced the project, they had a community meeting at O'Reilly, and they also came before the Planning Commission and the Design Review Board. The issues that were raised at that time included the concern about the Ceres Garden, and that had been like a shorter term lease with O'Reilly. And we worked with them, and they've been working, and obviously they've now relocated so that they have a stable environment, because we definitely did not want to lose the garden. And then in their original plan, which is not this plan, they've actually revised it based on those meetings. They were going to have buildings much closer to both Hurlbut and the south and the north Winona Lane area properties. But they heard, and they were going to be removing some of those additional trees. They did hear from the Planning Commission of making sure that there was enough buffer, particularly to Winona Lane, and the residential property on Hurlbut to the south, immediately to the south, which used to be owned by the Haskets. But they have increased the distance to that, and now they're maintaining all of those trees. And so those are a couple of ways that they've responded with this project that they've actually submitted. I think were requesting like a 10 or 15 foot setback from Winona Lane originally, and now it's what's on the other side of the large redwood trees. I'm not sure. It varies along it, but so they were made aware of that kind of proximity and the fact that Winona Lane is rural residential, and to understand the complexities of a very tall office building on one side and rural residential on the other. So those are the adjustments. Those were the main considerations. Our planning commission was actually interested in seeing more units and did encourage them to have height, particularly by the O'Reilly building. One of our commissioners did encourage accessible units for seniors, but also people with disabilities. And they have responded, again, as John had noted, with more accessible units than is required by California Building Code, as well as the potential for ground floor accessible ADUs, accessory dwelling units, and the potential for elevators in the units so that you could, still have a 2-story townhome, but have it be designed such that you could have an elevator and have it be accessible. So that was another response to the Planning Commission's comments in particular about the project. Yep. That's a good question. So this is a condominium development or a townhome development that will be for sale. So it will be individual owners with a homeowners association. I do not know whether they plan to sell them before or after they are built. I do know from City Ventures other models. Actually, John, can you answer that question?
Yeah, so from some of their other models, they sell them after they're constructed and then hold on to ownership within a year or so, and then the ownership is transferred over to the new owner. So they hold them for a period of time, and then when they find a new owner to move into those units, then the ownership is transferred over. Yes, I believe they own both of those parcels there.
Yep.
I know that they did a soil analysis and found, I can't remember what, arsenic and some other bad thing in the soil. Do you know what they're planning on, how they're planning on addressing that?
So we are in receipt of some of the reports that they've already done regarding the condition of the property, a phase 1 environmental site assessment, a phase 2. And part of the process of preparing the document is that our hazardous materials experts are reviewing those and then will recommend appropriate mitigation in the environmental document.
And just, I do see that we've had a couple folks join online. And so just to note, if you do have questions or comments in the session, if you just want to raise your hand in the Zoom, the reaction areas will recognize you and you can jump into the conversation as well. And one note, if you are interested in receiving project updates, so John Jay's email will be on the website, and you can let him know about it, and then we'll make sure that we notify you or let you know how you can get notifications. The city does have a new website, which is supposed to be helping us do notifications for this kind of stuff. If that gets set up, it'll be just automatically, sign up. But and there's John's email address as well. John's email is also, if you just go to the City of Sebastopol's website and the planning department, it's there as well. So you can find that. And if you have any other questions or comments, you can send them directly to him as well.
And just as noted on the slide, just make sure you note the subject as the Canopy NOP project. And then that way I can know exactly which project you're referring to.
Hi, I'm Ken Foley. I live inside town, right near Brookhaven. I have a question about process, because this is Sebastopol. I note that we're going to have 30 days to submit comments, and then the EIR will be prepared, and there'll be another 45 days to submit comments after that. How long does the city anticipate taking to prepare the EIR?
So I'm going to ask Katie if
I'm not looking for an
she's-
exact date. I'm looking for perhaps a best guess, taking into consideration that it's an extremely detailed document that you're looking at.
Correct.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So after Rincon prepares the document, we'll provide it to the city, who will do their own thorough review. It looks like this, you can expect this probably like mid to late fall of this year. Yeah.
No, till August 7th is simply like we had a question about the potential soil contamination. Yeah. So to submit comments about what potential environmental concerns you have. So we heard traffic today, we heard soils, we heard some information about like the site access on Hurlbutt, those types of things. So if you have, and we'll look at those, and like as we talked about the soils, that is going to be part of the EIR. So we have done our job as best we can as planners to say, hey, here's the things we've identified as potential issues. But we need to know if there's something out there that the community that we're not aware of. Similarly, we have sent letters to all of the tribes with concern in our town to make sure that they're aware that the project's going on, and they have 30 days to let us know if they want to consult with the city on that. Because we're not aware of it necessarily. So if you have something that we're not aware of, then only after that August 7th, then we'll be preparing the EIR. We have already started on some of the things that we know are going to be issues, like the traffic and the soils, and a couple other things that we kind of know, generally like the air quality and those types of things that are pretty standard for a project like this. But if there are other components that come in to it, and even like the light pollution, even if it doesn't require a full technical study, to take that into consideration as we look at mitigations or condition for the project. So like in the city of Sebastopol, our design guidelines require that you don't have light bleed on adjacent properties anyway. But yes, to make sure that we understand the community's concerns. And this particular technical kind of document also gets routed to state agencies. So Caltrans, Department of Water Resources, those types of things, if they have concerns and comments that they want us to address.
Are there any additional questions or comments from folks in the room today or in the Zoom call?
It looks like there's about 4 additional folks from the public and then a couple others from the environmental consultant team. And then just one note, we do have, as we said, we do have a new city website. There is a part of that site that is specific to development projects, where you can see it on a map, the development projects in town on a map. And there is a specific page for this project where we will continue to post updates to it. And I think we can get this slideshow, John, and a link to this video up on there. So if you want to review anything on the project page for this, yes, yep. And I believe there's already like a lot more drawings. We just showed the site plan today, but there's a whole bunch more drawings that show it all. Yeah.
So this is what the project or the development projects in town would look like on our website. So, and then you can click on the city ventures and it'll bring up their location on the map and then also the progression of the project. And then so under the documents is where the current project drawings are, and then any of the other additional documents from today's meeting, I will make sure to upload those onto that section of the website. All right, so if we don't have any additional questions or comments, I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting. And like I said earlier, if you have any questions or want to elaborate more on the topic that you spoke about today, feel free to email me or drop off a letter at City Hall. Thanks.
Recording stopped.